Shout with joy for Jacob, exalt at the head of the nations. Proclaim your praise and say, the Lord has delivered his people, the remnant of Israel. Behold, I will bring them back from the land of the north. I will gather them from the ends of the world, with the blind and the lame in their midst, and mothers and those with child. They shall return as an immense throng. They departed in tears, but I will console them and guide them. I will lead them to brooks of water on a level road, so that none shall stumble. For I am a father to Israel. Ephraim is my firstborn. The word of the Lord.
The responsorial is number 620, the cry of the poor.
The
A reading from the letter to the Hebrews. Brothers and sisters, every high priest is taken from among men and made their representative before God to offer gifts and sacrifices for sins. He is able to deal patiently with the ignorant and erring, for he himself is beset by weakness, and so for this reason must make sin offerings for himself as well as for the people. No one takes this honor upon himself, but only when called by God, just as Aaron was. In the same way, it was not Christ who glorified himself in becoming high priest, but rather the one who said to him, "You are my son, this day I have begotten you." Just as he says in another place, "You are a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek." The word of the Lord.
As Jesus was leaving Jericho with his disciples and a sizable crowd, Bartimaeus, a blind man, the son of Timaeus, sat by the roadside begging. On hearing that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to cry out and say, "Jesus, Son of David, have pity on me." And many rebuked him, telling him to be silent, but he kept calling out all the more, "Son of David, have pity on me." Jesus stopped and said, "Call him." So they called the blind man, saying to him, "Take courage, get up, Jesus is calling you." He threw aside his cloak, sprang up, and came to Jesus. Jesus said to him in reply, "What do you want me to do for you?" The blind man replied to him, "Master, I want to see." Jesus told him, "Go your way, your faith has saved you." Immediately he received his sight and followed him on the way. The Gospel of the Lord. One reason that prevents us from being truly ourselves and finding our own way, and I'll come back to finding our own way, is we do not realize the extent to which we are blind. We do not realize that we are on the outside looking in. We don't realize that in finding our own way, we are not necessarily following the way. If only we knew that we were blind, how eagerly we would seek to see, first, as Bartimaeus probably did, from men. Doctors, priests, holistic healers, soothsayers, you name it. And then, having lost all hope in princes, in the sons of men in whom there is no salvation, says Psalm 146, we turn to God. But the tragedy is that we do not realize our blindness. The many things visible before us distract us and command our attention so that we do not see the things invisible, as in the creed we will profess in a few minutes. I believe in one God, the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, of all things visible and invisible. Blinded by the world of things we can see, we forget that things visible do not match the depth of which man is capable, namely, the things we cannot see. Man is both small and great. And when we think of ourselves in an ever-expanding universe, immeasurably big and infinite, we see ourselves as a speck of dust, transient, frail, of no account. However, when we turn inwards, we discover that nothing in this immensity is great enough to completely fill us. The whole created world then becomes the speck of dust, passing, frail, and of no account, because the truth is we are too vast for the universe to fill, or should I say, fulfill us. Why? Because the things of this world have an opacity, a density, a weight, and a volume, but they have no depth. Only God can fill us. Only God can fulfill us. It is only when we have understood the difference between a presence that asserts itself, namely things visible, and a presence that we have to seek because we sense it in our hearts, what we cannot see, things invisible. Do we understand the difference between the heavy, opaque density of the world around us and the human depth which only God can fulfill? Every one of us is blinded by the visible, which prevents us from seeing the invisible. As were the passers-by who, when they saw Bartimaeus, were blinded with the eyes of indifference, so are we blind. As was Philip, who, when he saw a multitude, did a quick calculation on how much it would cost to feed them, was blinded by the eyes of frugality, so are we blind. As were the scribes and the Pharisees, who were ready to cast their stones, blinded by the eyes, loving every minute embarrassing the adulterous woman, so are we blind. As was the angry crowd who shouted, "Crucify," blinded by the eyes of hatred, so are we blind. Since the blind man, Bartimaeus, was blind to the visible, he was not distracted by things visible. Because he was blind to the visible, he was painfully aware that he was blind to the invisible. He knew he was on the outside looking in. And once we realize that we're blind, once we realize we're on the outside looking in, we can move from something that is imaginary to something that is very real. Because right now, we picture our eternal home with our blessed Lord, and we imagine warming our hands by the eternal fire of the Holy Spirit. We endeavor to share in the life that is still out of reach. So we take our stand where the gospel tells us to begin, before a door which is shut before us, never wearying of knocking until it opens. And like Bartimaeus, we cry out to God, seeking the way that unfolds before us like a path to heaven. Where we learn to focus on the invisible, where we change from being on the outside looking in to being on the inside looking out, is the church. The story of Bartimaeus, rooted in a real encounter, is a beautiful icon of the church. For a first century Jew, Jericho would carry with it the connotation of sin and corruption, since it was the city whose walls came down so that the conquering Israelites could enter it. Therefore, Bartimaeus, sitting in blindness by the walls of Jericho, evokes being in a region on the outside looking in, lost in our sin and unable to see the world right. Jesus calls Bartimaeus, gathering him into the community of the church, thereby giving him sight and enabling him to walk the right path. The church is that community whereby we learn, through Christ, how to see and how to walk. In the ancient world, when a young man joined a philosophical school, say Plato's Academy, he was not simply enrolling in a series of classes or course lectures in Platonic philosophy. He was signing up for an entire style of life involving practices and bodily disciplines, as well as new patterns of thought. And we find something very similar in the Acts of the Apostles, where the early church referred to as the Way, a term that catches this practical, embodied dimension of the Catholic way of life. The church is that society, that mystical body in which we learn to see from the inside looking out with the eyes of Christ and to walk the path that Christ walked. To live with Christ and to live like Christ is the Catholic way of life. Hence the reason why Bartimaeus could cry out to the Lord in utter despair with all the desperate hope he felt as salvation was passing him by. His heart was pure, and so he embodied the beatitude, "Blessed are the pure of heart, for they shall see God." And note that once he received his sight, he did not look here or there or take up for all that he missed. No, realizing that he was now on the inside of the church looking out, the gospel says, he immediately received his sight and followed Jesus on the way.